Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Whew. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
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 Thanks. Oh, thank you.
Deo, Deo.
Baby's got a burger and a shooter and that shake it won't go down. Baby's got a burger and a shooter and that shake it won't go down. Corrosion to her thighs, erosion of her pride. Baby's got sugar, baby's got corrosion now, baby's got it.
Greetings and salutations from the Chicagoland area. I have this, I'm allergic to too much headroom, but not Max Headroom. He's cool. Happy Friday, if that's your thing. Today is June 19th, and I believe that is the anniversary of the end of slavery. The end of slavery being in quotes, as we all know. A lot of black people not really into Juneteenth, as it's called, because they think, well, some of the people that have told me that it just doesn't ring true with the current state of affairs today. So, but in any event, and the state of Mississippi didn't get slavery off the books until 1991, if you can believe that. Well, you know, better late than never, but my God, that was really late. It was really late. Anywho, we got stuff here today for you. We got stuff. Chuck Barris likes to say, more stuff. CBC voters in the House. What's going on, Laine P? How you doing, Laine P? Be sure to check out the Undercurrent Wednesdays with us on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, and Substack. It's really a good show with Laine there, and we have some good guests on. So be sure to check that out. That's at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific time. On this channel, of course, subscribe to the Undercurrent. The Undercurrent, the number 4, NYOU is the name of the channel there. Chuck's Intergalactic UFO Show Intergalactic in the house as well. I hate to say I told you so, but this crowd, it's not a I told you so, because you already knew too. So they had signed the peace deal, or at least the ceasefire deal, on Wednesday, I believe, or yesterday. And then what do you know? Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, there it is. So game on. Do this. There we go. As Iran-U.S. talks in Geneva postponed over brutal Israeli attacks on Lebanon. Shocking, I know, that Israel somehow fucked this up for everybody else, but I know, shocking. I say in quotation marks. The start of a 60-day period of technical negotiations between Iran and the U.S. in Geneva was postponed today following a brutal Israeli escalation against South and East Lebanon. The Swiss Foreign Ministry confirmed in a statement that the talks have been pushed with no new date provided. Vice President J.D. Vance canceled his flight to Switzerland. Tehran's delegation also did not depart for the talks. According to a diplomatic source cited by CNN, Tehran is demanding guarantees that Israeli attacks on Lebanon end before going ahead with the talks, which means the talks are probably not going to happen because Israel doesn't know what the hell a ceasefire is. The Iranians have asked for guarantees that hostilities in Lebanon will end as outlined in the signed agreement. Mediators are currently working to resolve the issue. The source said, adding that talks have been temporarily postponed following the Israeli strikes in Lebanon. Technically, it's a memorandum of understanding, and apparently Israel doesn't understand. Or maybe they do. What's up, Willie? Good to see you. Willie with the 10 spot there. Nice. I will always dead name Larry Loomer, and I always dead name Twitter. Yes. Thank you for the $10, man. I appreciate you, as always. Okay, that's all. Yeah. So surprise, right, that this happened. The Iranians have asked for guarantees that hostilities in Lebanon will end as outlined in the signed agreement. Mediators are currently working to resolve the issue. The only way you can resolve that issue is to take Israel out of the equation altogether. That's my little 2 cents there. The talks have been temporarily postponed following the Israeli strikes in Lebanon. So they said, look, stop fucking around or no peace. And they start, United States lets their little bitch girlfriend do this shit, and Lebanon's like, no, you need to handle your business over there. The postponement came as heavy Israeli airstrikes hit Nabatea and elsewhere across South Lebanon. Intense Israeli bombing targeted residential buildings in Dwyer, Haruf, Kfar Ruman, Habush, and Dair al-Zarani. Again, as always, if I butcher those names, it wasn't intentional. I gave it the old college try. Triggering a widespread wave of forced displacement towards Beirut. An Israeli air raid on the Al-Jamalia area, or Jamalia? I'm not quite sure how that's pronounced. Area north of Baalbek in eastern Lebanon killed 3 people today. One person was also killed in the town of Jezin in the south. Since Thursday night, at least 18 people have been killed in Lebanon. And since Thursday night, that was when the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, was signed. That was Israel's cue to let's fuck that up. The airstrikes marked Israel's deadly response to Hezbollah's precise overnight resistance operations targeting Israeli troops occupying South Lebanon. 4 Israeli soldiers were killed by Hezbollah operations early Friday morning. Hebrew newspaper Ma'ariv reported a disaster among Israeli forces in South Lebanon. A suspicious target hit a tank. It is not known whether it was a drone or an anti-tank missile. The tank was severely damaged and caught fire. The 4 occupants of the tank were injured. Fighters rushed to the scene, rushed to the rescue to rescue the injured, but a medical team was forced to declare them dead at the scene, the newspaper said. Hezbollah has vowed to continue fighting until Israel withdraws its troops from Lebanon and ends its attacks on the country. After the deadly ambush set by our fighters, a second Israeli force attempted to advance in order to evacuate the dead and wounded under heavy fire cover. The fighters of the Islamic resistance then targeted this force with a volley of rockets and mortar shells, achieving confirmed casualties, the resistance group said in a statement early on Friday. Tel Aviv has expressed outrage over the newly signed Memorandum of Understanding between the U.S. and Iran, which includes Lebanon. Israeli officials have threatened to renew strikes against the Islamic Republic and demand continued freedom of action in Lebanon. Tehran has warned that Israeli violations in Lebanon will be met with harsh retaliation. And Hezbollah, I'm sure, is going to help them out with that. Why are you doing this? Okay. Meanwhile, Iran's chief negotiator says U.S. talks bound by Tehran's red lines. So, Iran's chief negotiator Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf said today that talks with the U.S. would remain bound by Tehran's red lines. As we have shown in the past path of negotiations, we are steadfast in fulfilling the conditions and red lines set and in achieving the interests of the Iranian nation, Ghalibaf said in remarks published by the official IRNA news agency. If the enemy seeks to be excessive, we have proven that our fingers are on the trigger, and we have no hesitation in giving a crushing response to the enemy. Tehran and Washington signed a memorandum of understanding, the MOU, this week, tentatively ending a regional war that erupted on February 28th. Who knows if this is actually done or not. Ghalibaf's remarks came after Iran's Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei. Some people say Khamenei or Khamenei, or we've been saying Khamenei for years. I don't know which is right. Said he had approved the U.S.-Iran deal despite having a different view on the matter, without elaborating. In a message read out on state television, Khamenei said that direct talks with the U.S. will not mean accepting the enemy's point of view. In response to Khamenei's message, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said the country's foreign policy apparatus will be used to secure the sublime interest of Iran. President Masoud Pezeshkian, who signed the deal on behalf of his country, issued a similar statement promising to adhere to Iran's red lines. And apparently one of the red lines is Lebanon. So the deal, which Trumpy also signed, lays the groundwork for a detailed 60-day negotiations on Iran's nuclear program and sanctions relief, which is currently on hold now, thanks to Israel. It remains unclear when talks for a final settlement will start after the postponement. The agreement provides for an end to the Middle East war on all fronts, including Lebanon, the lifting of the 2-month U.S. naval blockade on Iranian ports, and Tehran's opening of the Strait of Hormuz with no charge for 60 days only. We'll get to a list here in just a moment of what's actually in the MOU. Actually, we could probably just do that right now. Get in here. This is Al Arabiya English on the old tweeters here. So they at Al Arabiya English obtain a copy of the MOU. The document includes following key points. So the very first one is Iran and the U.S., together with their allies in the current war, declare upon the signing of this MOU an immediate and permanent end to the war on all fronts, including Lebanon, and undertake that from now on they will not launch any hostile action against each other and will refrain from the threat or use of force against each other. Iran and the U.S. undertake to respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity and to refrain from interfering in each other's internal affairs. That's a subtle jab at somebody. Iran and the U.S. undertake to negotiate and reach a final agreement within a maximum period of 60 days. Like I said, that's been postponed for right now. Immediately upon the signing of this MOU, the U.S. will lift the naval blockade, which it has for now. We'll get to that here in a second, and prevent any interference or obstruction against Iran and restore traffic within a maximum of 30 days to its full capacity. The traffic of ships shall be proportional to the pre-war volume of traffic on Iran's part. The U.S. also undertakes to withdraw its forces from the surrounding areas, that would be the GCC, within 30 days after the final agreement. So this agreement is supposed to go in stages, right? They're going to talk about their nuclear program. I think they're going to talk about Gaza too as being part of this, but that's all part of the steps. Upon signing the MOU, Iran will immediately take steps to ensure that the movement of merchant ships from the Arabian Gulf to the Sea of Oman and vice versa is resumed within 30 days to the pre-war volume, taking into account the need for the removal of technical obstacles and the neutralization of mines by Iran. The U.S. undertakes, together with its regional partners, to create a comprehensive plan agreed upon by both parties for the rehabilitation and economic development of Iran while ensuring financing of at least $300 billion, which they have done, I believe. The U.S. has said those were private funds, So, but they also have funds that they have frozen for Iran. So I don't know if that's part of that too or not, but the implementation mechanism of this plan as part of the final agreement will be formulated within 60 days. Now, it could be longer. The U.S. commits to ending on a schedule to be agreed upon as part of the final agreement all types of sanctions currently facing Iran, including resolutions of the UN Security Council and the Board of Governors of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, and all unilateral U.S. sanctions, both primary and secondary. So I would assume that part means the unfreezing of assets. Again, I'm not quite sure. Everything is in flux after today, so Iran reiterates that it will never produce nuclear weapons, just like they've been saying. We don't want nukes. We'll never get them. Iran and the U.S. have agreed that the fate of enriched material and the fate of all other mutually agreed nuclear-related issues, including Iran's nuclear needs, will be adequately addressed. Iran and the U.S. agree that pending a final agreement, they will maintain the status quo. Iran will maintain the status quo on its nuclear program, and the U.S. will not impose new sanctions on Iran or strengthen its forces in the region. The U.S. undertakes that immediately after the signing of this memorandum of understanding and until the date of the lifting of sanctions, the U.S. Treasury Department will issue waivers for exports of Iranian crude oil, petrochemical products and their derivatives, and all related services, including banking, insurance, transportation, and the like. What's up, Dingo? Good to see you. The U.S. undertakes that in light of the progress of negotiations toward a final agreement, frozen or restricted funds and assets of Iran will be released and made fully available. So that's it. So the $300 billion is separate from the frozen assets, I believe. These funds, whether held in the master account or transferred, will be used for any final beneficiary payment determined by the Central Bank of Iran and will be fully available for use. The U.S. undertakes to issue all necessary permits and licenses on this basis. Iran and the U.S. agreed that an implementation mechanism will be established to oversee the successful implementation of and future commitment to the final agreement. Following the signing of this MOU and upon receipt of assurances regarding the commencement of implementation of Articles 4, 5, 10, and 11 of this MOU and the continued implementation of these steps, Iran and the U.S. will enter into negotiations for a final agreement solely with respect to the remaining articles. The final agreement will be approved through a binding resolution of the UN Security Council. So there you go. That is what the U.S. had agreed to. That's what Trumpy signed off on. And then the fuckery today, they had delayed it because of the continued bombing. So as long apparently there's a ceasefire in effect, but we'll get to that in just a second. But first, the Strait of Hormuz traffic drops after postponement of U.S.-Iran talks. Yes, actions have consequences. Shipping traffic in the Strait of Hormuz appears to have decreased today following the postponement of planned talks between the U.S. and Iran and Switzerland. The two sides had signed a memorandum of understanding on Wednesday, as we told you that, and were due to formally open a 60-day negotiation window on a final agreement centered on Iran's nuclear program in Bergenstock, Switzerland. Those talks have been postponed. The cancellation is a setback for stabilization in the region. Maritime risk agency Maersk said in a note to clients cited by Bloomberg on Friday, that's the big shipping company there, unless diplomatic talks resume, the security situation is likely to remain volatile and maritime operations will continue to face ongoing uncertainty. And that also means that insurance going through the strait will remain high too. So there is that to think about. Belgian ship owners say they remain in the dark about the situation near the strait. We assume that most are waiting until the weekend to see if there is any progress on the matter. The Royal Belgian Ship Owners Association, KBRV, all right, Belgium, said on Friday, Loic van Stay, managing director of the KBRV, highlighted the danger posed by sea mines. We'll just have to wait and see. See, SEA and SEE. I don't think he was trying to be honey. After the weekend, many ships will be watching to see if anyone else dares to sail through the strait. If they do, others will soon follow. Other maritime organizations are also warning of safety risks for vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz, pointing to concerns about sea mines and heavy traffic in the narrow waterway. On Thursday, 25 commercial vessels passed through the strait, the highest daily count in 2 months. The blockade of the vital shipping lane was lifted as part of the peace agreement. Under that agreement, Iran, in consultation with other Gulf states, is to take charge of management and maritime services in the strait. The government has made Iranian sovereignty over the strait a key condition in negotiations. To that end, it has established the so-called Persian Gulf Strait Authority, the PGSA, which is mandated to authorize and regulate maritime transit through the strait. Yeah, it's no secret that Israel was not a big fan of this ceasefire, since they're the ones that basically started it in the first place. I don't know. Trumpy growing a pair of balls against Israel, that doesn't sound right. It doesn't pass the smell test, as they say. Or maybe they do. Maybe it does. So as part of the talks, of course, they're talking about the strait. They're talking about the nuclear program later in the talks, but Iran says missile program not part of the talks with the U.S. You know, the hypersonic missiles that basically just destroyed U.S. bases and the Iron Dome. Iran said Thursday that its missile program will not be part of future negotiations with the U.S. after the two sides agreed a framework deal for the ending, agreed on a framework deal for ending their war. Trumpy and Iranian President Pezeshkian signed a MOU. We already told you about that. The agreement lays the groundwork for detailed negotiations on Iran's nuclear program and sanctions relief for Tehran. There is no mention in the deal of Iran's missile program, a longstanding concern for Washington and Israel. Our missiles do not like at all to be talked about by anyone, Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Bakai said in an interview with Iranian state television. You talk to your missiles? Well, they do put pictures and write on them too. So Iranian missiles are only for firing, not for negotiations. Iran's defense capability will not be discussed in any way in any process or with any party. During the nearly 40-day war, Iran's missile infrastructure came under heavy U.S.-Israeli bombardment, but Tehran continued to respond with missile and drone attacks across the region. Before the war, U.S. Secretary of State Aquaman Marco Rubio had warned that Iran would need to negotiate over its ballistic missile arsenal, which Washington views as a threat to Israel and U.S. military bases in the region. Iran has repeatedly refused to discuss what it describes as its defensive capabilities. On Wednesday, Trumpy appeared to soften his position, saying it would be unfair for Iran not to have missiles. I'm saying that if other countries have them, it's a little bit unfair for them not to have some, Trump said, to which Bibi replied, that's supposed to be a steam horn, a steam whistle, and smoke, steam coming out of the ears. A ballistic missile is not the same thing as what we're talking about when we talk nuclear. Even though you can put nuclear stuff on ballistic missiles. That's funny. I believe there was some sort of Twitter article where Ryan Grimm talks about like some of the stuff he was saying, like, let him have missiles, who cares? To which Israel's like, good stuff there. So as we said, as part of the deal, CENTCOM has announced the end of the U.S. blockade on Iran. This is from Dave DeCamp over at antiwar.com. Be sure to check them out. They do a lot of good news aggregation over there and their own brand of journalism as well. Be sure to share them out too. They do good work. So U.S. Central Command announced Thursday that the U.S. military was lifting its blockade of Iranian ports in line with the MOU signed by Israel. They're never signing that. Iran and the U.S. Today, U.S. forces lifted the blockade on all maritime traffic entering and exiting Iranian ports and coastal areas. In accordance with the president's direction, American forces are not impeding the transit of vessels to or from Iranian ports. All U.S. military blockade enforcement efforts have ceased, CENTCOM says. Now, CENTCOM is saying that, and basically you can take what CENTCOM says with a grain of salt. These are the same people that said that the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier, that the laundry room caused this big ass fire on the boat, and we all know that's horse caca. Nay Bones, what's up? Good to see you. You and Dingo over there on the Rumbly Tumblies. Good to see you as always. The command said that U.S. forces will remain in the area. As U.S. officials have said, the blockade can be reimposed if it deems that Iran isn't fulfilling its commitments under the deal. So they're just hanging out there. Our great naval ships will remain in the general area to make sure that all aspects of the agreement are adhered to, obeyed, and in full force and effect, CENTCOM said. The U.S. has been enforcing the blockade on Iran for over 2 months, which involved at least 9 attacks on civilian commercial vessels, including a missile strike last week that killed 3 Indian mariners, an incident Trump expressed no regret about when meeting with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the G7 summit in France on Wednesday. It's expected to take some time for traffic through the Strait of Hormuz to return anywhere near pre-war levels. But oil prices have been dropping since the U.S. and Iran signed the MOU. But with recent developments, I'm pretty sure some of that's going to change. So I put this down. You would think this would be a big deal, but knowing one of the players involved, we know this is probably more poo-poo caca. Israel and Hezbollah agreed to a ceasefire starting today. Israel and Hezbollah. Now, this isn't the Lebanese government. This is Hezbollah. All right. So Israel and Hezbollah have agreed to a ceasefire set to begin today. It's already past 4 o'clock their time. So apparently the ceasefire is in effect, unless there's some breaking news, which would not surprise me one bit, that Israel actually screwed this one up too. Hezbollah and Israel have agreed to a ceasefire, a U.S. official said on background, adding that negotiators for the U.S. and Qataris worked out the deal with help from Iran. We understand that after the exchange of fire earlier today, Israel and Hezbollah are now in a ceasefire. Yeah, so that again, grain of salt. Throw it over your shoulder for good luck. I can't remember which shoulder you throw it over, but yeah. So, and as everybody knows, ceasefires mean nothing to Israel. Oh, now, yeah. So now, hey, what's up, Lance? Now they're talking about, yeah, he's got to go to war with somebody. Those bombs don't launch themselves. So of course, Netanyahu's got to be a fucking dick about things too. As Netanyahu reaffirms Israel won't withdraw from Lebanon despite the MOU. So Bibi on Thursday reaffirmed his position that Israel won't withdraw from southern Lebanon and end its war in the country, despite the U.S.-Iran MOU that calls for an end to the conflict. We will restore security and prosperity to northern towns, Shithead said. That requires maintaining the security zone in southern Lebanon. It requires that we not leave there as long as Israel's security needs requirement. Ah, that's right. Remember the old, we're just defending ourselves by invading? The U.S. military on Thursday also made it clear it was not withdrawing, or the Israeli military, well, same thing, on Thursday also made clear it was not withdrawing from Lebanon and published a new map showing an expanded occupation zone. We'll get to that, I believe, coming up here. Yeah, okay. The IDF is deployed in the security zone around 10 kilometers inside Lebanese territory due to operational requirements, the IDF said in a post on X, their Twitter, that showed the map. IDF soldiers will continue to remove threats and strengthen the defense of Israel's northern residents that are in Lebanon. An Israeli official told Reuters that Israel was holding stubborn negotiations with Trumpy on maintaining its occupation of Lebanon, but so far there's no sign that Trump is willing to leverage U.S. military aid to end the war. Israel Hayom reported that Netanyahu is bracing for pressure from Trump over the war in Lebanon, but that there is currently no U.S. demand for the withdrawal of Israeli troops from the country. That may change after today. Iranian officials have maintained that Israel must end the war and withdraw from Lebanon as part of its deal with the U.S., and the Iranian military has warned of a harsh response if Israel continues its attacks. Israeli strikes in Lebanon haven't stopped, and at least 3 people were killed on Thursday. And we said 19 people since this whole thing started. So let's take a look at Israel's plans here. Israel plans expanded occupation of Lebanon in defiance of U.S.-Iran pact. So this is the security zone in which IDF soldiers are operating in southern Lebanon. So, yeah, so this is the south here, and then they want to go all the way up here to the Zarani River, I believe. The Israeli army published a map yesterday of a new expanded zone of control in southern Lebanon, detailing a significant expansion in military occupation and operations, according to Reuters. Israeli forces have said they will not rule out carrying out attacks beyond occupation lines, challenging the recently signed Islamabad MOU between the U.S. and Iran, which categorically calls for a halt to fighting between Israel and Lebanon. The first point of the MOU, as we told you, which ended the U.S.-Israel war on Iran, declares an immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts, including Lebanon, as well as ensuring the territorial integrity and sovereignty. Israel has so far not ended its attacks on Lebanon and repeatedly rejected calls to withdraw troops from southern Lebanon. Trump has grown seemingly irritated with Israel's heavy-handed approach in Lebanon, saying on Wednesday, "When 2 drones are shot in the desert and drop harmlessly, you don't have to knock down buildings in Beirut." Meow. Kitty likes to scratch. The map reveals that Israeli forces are operating several kilometers deeper into Lebanese territory than previously thought. Israeli troops have been in these areas for several weeks, but they had not yet published a map showing the expanded zone of control, marked in dark red on the map published on Thursday. Let's see if we can see that. That's these right here, the dark red. Okay. Israel has pushed about 10 kilometers into Lebanese land and maritime territory along its yellow line. It's a yellow line because it pisses on you. The zone extends into 8 additional villages: Mazrat, Bayut, El Sayad, Majdal Zone, Hadatha, Bayit Yahun, Zatar El Sharkiye, Arnoun, Harmor, and Kafar Tebnit, according to the architect and spatial researcher Ahmad Baidoun. Lebanon's national news agency reported on Thursday that an Israeli drone attack struck a car near Kafar Tebnit, killing 2 people. 1 other person is known to have been killed in a separate Israeli strike in Zebdini. The agency also reported that an Israeli drone dropped ammunition in Bayat Yahun, wounding 2 people. Lebanon's health ministry on Tuesday said at least 3,826 people have been killed and over 11,800 have been wounded since the U.S.-Israel war on Iran was launched back in February. Reuters reported that an Israeli official close to Benjamin Netanyahu said that stubborn negotiations were underway with Trump regarding keeping Israeli troops deployed inside Lebanese territory. The official stated that Israel would not withdraw from the area south of Lebanon's Litani River. Another Israeli official told Reuters that the result of these negotiations depended on whether Trump decided, quote, to force the issue by threatening consequences if Israel failed to respect the MOU. It wouldn't be the first time a president has threatened Israel. I mean, I think Reagan did that when Menachem Begin was in charge, said, hey, cut that shit out or we take away your money. And Begin was like, okay. You need not say anymore. Trump heavily criticized Israeli conduct in southern Lebanon on Tuesday, saying the country had been killing civilians and not just Hezbollah members. Yeah, thanks for waking up, Trump. There's a little place called Gaza, too, you might want to check out. Same thing happening over there, jackass. Speaking at the G7 summit on Tuesday, Trump said too many people have been killed in Lebanon and suggested Israeli tactics were disproportionate and indiscriminate. You don't say! Really? You're just now figuring that out? Is the medication haze starting to clear for you? Yeah, that's right. So you don't have to knock down an apartment house every time you're looking for somebody. Because there are a lot of people in those apartment houses, and they're not all Hezbollah, he said. Hello, is he just now figuring out that this is collective punishment? Jeez Louise. Yeah, he did too. You're right there. I think Reagan was the last one, though, to do it. Everybody else just kind of went pussy on him. Scaredy cats. He added that overall Israel had been fighting with the Lebanese armed group for too long. Trump's comments come amid growing tensions between the U.S. and Israel over the recently announced MOU to end the conflict with Iran. Yeah, that's true. That's true. The intention may be false, but what he says is actually true. I mean, he's just basically saying it for what reasons we don't know. That's for sure. But what he's saying, but what he says is true. You don't have to knock down an apartment house every time you're looking for somebody. It's not like the U.S. It's not like ICE who can just, bust in. Oh, wait. Yeah. Yeah, they do that too. Sorry. Numerous Israeli officials have expressed opposition to the deal, particularly terms that suggest an end to Israel's attacks on Lebanon. Wait till they get to Gaza, if they ever get to that part of the negotiations. Numerous Israeli officials have expressed opposition to the deal, particularly to terms that suggest an end to Israel's attacks on Lebanon. On Sunday, Trump exhorted Netanyahu for launching attacks in Lebanon that threatened to derail the final agreement just hours before it was announced. He's a very difficult guy, Trump said of Netanyahu. And to be honest with you, he should be very thankful to us for doing this, because if Iran had a nuclear weapon, Israel wouldn't be around for 2 hours. That's... Yeah, the devil always mixes truth with his lies, but he ain't lying when he said if Iran had a nuclear weapon, Israel would be toast. Probably literally. Then on Tuesday, Trump said he wanted Syria to invade Lebanon to fight Hezbollah, saying that President Ahmed al-Shara's forces could have done a better job against the group than Israel. Israel's fighting Hezbollah too long and too many people are being killed. I suggested to Israel to let Syria take care of Hezbollah, Trump told reporters sitting alongside Qatar's ruler on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Evian, France. He's very capable, he said, referring to Shara. If Israel can't do the job without killing everyone else, he'll do the job. Syria will do the job. It sounds like he's talking about a contractor. It's like, oh, you guys just knock down all these walls. I got this guy that could come in, put up some nice particle board, do it on the cheap. Yeah, so I gotta be honest with you, I have no idea what's going to be happening with these, if these negotiations are going to happen. Whew, your guess is as good as mine. Stay tuned, I guess, as this soap opera keeps on pushing. So it's no secret that Trump was pissed off that his NATO buddies didn't jump in and try and mess with Iran too. So Smeg's Breath, shout out to Miss Tree. For some reason, Mystery, she mentioned me. She said she couldn't comment or something like that. But if you're watching, Mystery, it's good to see you. I hope you're doing well. U.S. Secretary of War blasts shameful NATO Captain Haircut here. So, U.S. Secretary of War Pete Smegsbreath has announced a 6-month review of America's military footprint in Europe, warning that future deployments, funding, and basing arrangements will depend on whether NATO members meet Washington's demands. Speaking at a meeting of NATO defense ministers in Brussels, Smegsbreath accused European members of refusing to provide predictable access to their bases and airspace during the U.S. war with Iran. It was shameful, he said. These allies put America's sons and daughters, our sons and daughters, at risk. There's no excuse for that. No, motherfucker, you're the one who puts America's sons and daughters at risk. You're the one shooting the weapons, stupid. The remarks came as Washington is already scaling back forces and assets earmarked for NATO operations in Europe, forcing the bloc's planners to revise assumptions about U.S. support in a crisis. The cuts reportedly include 1/3 of pledged U.S. fighter jets and long-range bombers, along with aerial refueling tankers, maritime surveillance aircraft, and key naval assets once factored into NATO contingency plans. I'm announcing today a 6-month Department of War review that will examine America's force posture and basing in Europe, Smegsbreath said, adding that countries that fail to spend with urgency could see U.S. dues reduced. And then he turned to the camera and said, "Until next time," and then he ran into a cave. Just like Skeletor. The criticism landed during the first NATO ministerial attended by Britain's new Defense Secretary Dan Jarvis, who replaced John Healey after a dispute with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer over military spending. London has pledged to reach NATO's new 5% spending target by 2035, including 3.5% on direct military expenditure, but Jarvis arrived in Brussels without announcing any new funding commitments. For years, Trumpy has berated European NATO members, accusing them of not paying enough for their own defense, despite the fact that they have spent billions arming Kiev in its conflict with Moscow. Many of the same governments have also invoked the threat of a looming Russian attack to justify increased military spending. The Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. Remember that? Wasn't that like a movie or something, or a play or a book? One of those things. The split has widened over Iran after several NATO members, including France, Spain, and Italy, restricted access to their bases and airspace for U.S. aircraft involved in the bombing campaign. London allowed American forces to strike Iran from RAF Fairford in Gloucester, but Smegsbreath nevertheless criticized the UK, because sure, why not? Whether it's in the UK or Diego Garcia. Have you ever been to Diego Garcia? It's great, man. They have like these chips, and they got like this melted goat cheese over them. It's like, sounds like a Mexican restaurant. I'm sorry. Diego Garcia. My fault. We can't live in a world where other countries are standing at the end of a runway with a clipboard trying to decide what flies and what doesn't, he told journalists, referring to his later discussions with Jarvis. Not confused with Jarvis, that runs Iron Man suit. Smegsbreath framed the dispute as part of Europe's broader failure to carry its share of NATO's military burden. He said the bloc had become a paper tiger and a one-way street, Captain Analogy over there, after the Cold War, drifting away from hard power into distraction, deindustrialization, demilitarization, and free riding. Not to be confused with free balling. What's up, Rondo? Good to see you. The Russians are coming is called McCarthyism. That's right. We're going to scare you with them Ruskies. It's a time-honored tradition in America. According to Hegseth, or also known as Smegsbreath, Trump is seeking to turn the bloc into NATO 3.0, a more openly militarized bloc in which Europe leads its own conventional defense while the U.S. focuses on its global priorities, such as stealing other people's leaders, threatening an island with no electricity, threatening to steal Greenland. Yeah, you know, the usual. Pretty wild. And NATO should really be careful, because when you poke the bear, the Russian bear, things tend to happen. Kremlin warns NATO of devastating response following massive Ukrainian drone attack in Moscow. Don't forget about the Ukrainian-Russian war. Yeah, xenophobia, the American way. A time-honored tradition, for sure. Moscow's Ministry of Foreign Affairs warned on Thursday that an attack by any NATO country would instigate a decisive and devastating retaliation following what has been described as the largest Ukrainian air attack on Russia in years. Once again, I would like to emphasize that in the event of aggression by any NATO state against any Russian region, our response will be decisive and devastating for those who initiate such a reckless move. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman and my future ex-wife, Maria Zakharova, declared, and no brigade commanders of the West, as they call themselves, no capabilities, potential, or defense lines will help them. They should realize what they are pushing Europe toward with such statements and actions, she added. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Thursday that words are no longer sufficient to describe Kiev's terrorist acts. There he is right there. It was no coincidence that the president announced some time ago, after another stunt by the Kiev terrorists, that we would now conduct massive combined strikes on a regular basis against targets whose condition directly affects the combat capability of the armed forces of Ukraine, Lavrov added. The top Russian diplomat stressed that Moscow's forces will continue to respond to Kiev strikes and that the task has been assigned by the Supreme Commander-in-Chief. Earlier on Thursday, a massive Ukrainian drone attack hit Russia with swarms of hundreds of drones launched toward Moscow and surrounding areas. Russian authorities claimed over 200 drones were intercepted, but said others reached their targets. The Kapotnia oil refinery sustained heavy damage. Video footage showed massive explosions and destruction at the key energy site. That's the stuff right there. The boom, boom. This was the second Ukrainian attack on the refinery this week. Locals described black rain and bits of oil residue and debris littering the streets of Moscow. Not to be confused with Black Rain, the Michael Douglas movie from the late 80s, early 90s, I think. The attack resulted in civilian casualties and significant damage to civilian infrastructure. Shopping centers, residential buildings, and cottages in Zhukovsky, Elektrostal, Lyubertsky, Kotelnitsky, and the Chekhov districts of the capital were damaged. Nuclear vessels, Captain. That Chekhov, probably not the same Chekhov. Several people were injured by shrapnel, including a 3-year-old child. At least one was killed. The Russian Defense Ministry said 1,000 drones and several cruise missiles were launched by Ukraine and intercepted over a period of 24 hours. Kiev framed the strikes as retaliation for Russian attacks on Ukraine's capital last week. Just a day earlier, Moscow accused Ukraine of a drone attack that hit a bus full of Belarusian schoolchildren. Ukraine denied responsibility for the strike. The latest attacks on Moscow came after a meeting of the G7 in France on Wednesday. We, the leaders of the G7, stand united in our unwavering support for Ukraine and their Nazis. I'm sorry, I added that part. In defending its freedom, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, even though we fucked over Russia back in 2014, but we won't get into that. To support and accelerate this new momentum, we agreed to increase the delivery of air defense capabilities, additional systems and interceptors, and long-range capabilities, read a joint statement after the meeting, which they rolled up some weed and then smoked it as a joint, so they could literally say it was a joint statement. The G7 nations also threatened more sanctions against Russia once the Strait of Hormuz is reopened as part of a memorandum of understanding reached between the U.S. and Iran. Maybe that's not going to happen either. We commit to increase the pressure on the Russian war economy. In this context, we will strengthen our sanctions, including those on the oil and gas sectors. We consider this the right moment to proceed with additional measures, as Trumpy has delivered a deal that we support in reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Wah, wah. That's the sad trombone. Kiev continues to expand attacks deep inside Russia while lobbying Western powers for additional military support. U.S. and EU arms makers will reportedly start manufacturing advanced long-range weaponry under license in Ukraine in order to facilitate stronger deep strike capabilities against Russia, according to a diplomatic source cited by Le Parisien on Wednesday. So, yeah, it seems like a lot of these events that are going on are all kind of, it's all there. There's some synchronicity somewhere in there, you know. All the makings of a actual world war coming to fruition. So Moscow and Britain mixing it up as Moscow protesters brand the UK sponsor of terror. So this is them out here. I think this is outside the British ambassador's residence in Moscow. Holding up, UK is not okay. More than 500 activists gathered outside the British ambassador's residence in Moscow yesterday during a reception marking King Charles III's official birthday, accusing the UK of acting as a sponsor of terrorism through its military support for Ukraine. Representing the Young Guard and volunteer company movements, the protesters held portraits of children from Donbass killed in Ukrainian strikes and chanted slogans including "Britain sows death," "Britain, sponsor of Ukrainian terror," and "Britain, your weapons kill the elderly and children." As guests arrived for the annual diplomatic reception, Alexander Amilin, head of the Young Guard's central staff and a senior figure in the youth wing of the ruling United Russia Party, accused London of fueling the conflict by supplying weapons to Kiev, which they absolutely did. Look at these two. They're so in love. They're so in love. Great Britain officially supplies weapons to Ukraine, which kills children in Donbass, which fly to our cities and hit civilian infrastructure, buses, houses, residential buildings, he said. Amilin argued that British military support has become part of a long-term strategy to back the Nazi regime in Ukraine. He also criticized that, and Russia, no fan of Nazis at all. At all. At all. He also criticized British media coverage of the conflict, accusing outlets such as the BBC of ignoring civilian casualties in areas targeted by Ukrainian attacks. Funny, what, the BBC doing propaganda? No, that's crazy talk. You won't see BBC journalists here. They didn't come to Starobelsk either, he said, referring to a Ukrainian drone strike on a vocational college dorm in the Lugansk People's Republic that killed 21 people, mostly teenage girls. Around 50 foreign journalists from 19 countries visited the site at Moscow's invitation, while the BBC and CNN refused to attend. Well, yeah, because they don't do actual news. So, yeah, things are starting to come to a boil, as the saying goes. Lots of weird things going on in the world right now. And Cuba, this is very surprising. Cuba's Communist Party approves opening economy in unprecedented move. What's going on down in Cuba? That's Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel. Right there. He looks very solemn. Cuba's Communist Party has approved a raft of unprecedented free market measures as part of an emergency economic package. The package was submitted to the country's National Assembly yesterday, where it is all but assured to pass. The plan would expand opportunities for private enterprise and create measures to attract additional foreign investment, including from Cubans abroad. It could also set the stage for private real estate development on the Caribbean island and the transformation of state-owned businesses into private commercial ventures with shares and equity stakes. It would also allow private banks to enter Cuba's once state-dominated financial sector. Oh boy. The reform package signals a dramatic shift for Cuba, which is led by the Communist Party. Speaking to the party's Central Committee in a broadcast yesterday, President Miguel Diaz-Canel said the country's dire economic situation could not be blamed on external pressure alone. For decades, the U.S. has imposed a trade embargo on Cuba, weakening its economy. Since January, the U.S. pressure against Cuba has increased, with the Trump administration blocking fuel deliveries to the island. But Diaz-Canel acknowledged that some of the present-day economic strife was due to domestic factors, referencing obstacles that don't come from outside, nor the blockade. He pointed to slowness, bureaucracy, and norms that impede those who want to produce, as well as decisions that we have put off. The situation calls for urgent and necessary changes, he said. On Thursday, the European Union also increased pressure on Cuba, passing a resolution that called for sanctions on Diaz-Canel and the leadership of Grupo de Administración Empresarial S.A., a business conglomerate operated by the Cuban military. The EU resolution condemned what it described as the systematic repression by the Cuban government, while calling for profound economic and political change. Oh boy. In his address, Diaz-Canel suggested there would likely be some opposition to the emergency economic plan from hardliners in the Communist Party, which has officially governed Cuba for over 60 years. Some of the reforms, he said, will not have absolute consensus but cannot be postponed. Former Cuban leader Raul Castro, who was indicted by the U.S. in May, has also backed the plan. Trump administration officials, notably Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Aquaman, have repeatedly said that economic reforms could ease Washington's pressure campaign against the island, but the U.S. did not immediately respond to the latest moves. Meanwhile, J.D. Vance was asked on Thursday if the Trump administration would now turn its sights to Cuba after reaching a MOU to end the war on Iran, which is probably not going to happen. Trump has repeatedly floated both military attacks and what he described as a friendly takeover of Cuba. Vance responded that Washington wanted Cubans to be happy and successful. We're actually talking to the Cuban government right now about how they could change their ways to change that, Vance said. You can get rid of communism and, you know, we can do business, y'all. If they make smart decisions, we're going to have a much better relationship with that island. And by smart decisions, they mean give up communism. Interesting that they're doing this. We're gonna keep an eye on that, and there must be some internal pressure going on. You know, of course, they've been in that blockade since '65. You've heard the stories about Cubans, you know, repairing their old cars, so there's just nothing but old cars there because there's no foreign imports or anything like that due to the blockade. Like that cartoon from the 90s, Pirates of Greenwater. Oh, you're talking about the pool? Yeah, I didn't include the pool. I thought that was it's just some dumb shit. I mean, dumb shit on top of other dumb shit that this administration is doing. And Obama had trouble with that pool too. I don't see why they still had. They should get rid of that thing. I don't care. Fuck history. Get rid of that thing. Just make it a one big giant yard. Make it a lawn or something, or plant some trees. Do something. So we all know that Congress is corrupt as hell, and somebody is trying to make some sort of attempt to do something about it, but we'll see. GOP Rep Style pushes bill curbing members of Congress from prediction market betting. Ooh, yikes, that's too much face. The thing. A Republican House member on Thursday was set to introduce a provision that would ban congressional lawmakers and their families from placing bets on prediction markets on topics including policy, politics, and elections. The provision by Representative Brian Style of Wisconsin is being added to a pending bill that would ban members of Congress from purchasing new shares of individual stocks other than those that are bought with dividends from existing holdings. Yeah, a Band-Aid on a shotgun wound. GOP lawmakers have already promised that the bill which is backed by House Speaker Mike Johnson, and Trumpy will get a vote on the House floor. Style chairs the committee that oversees the rules governing House lawmakers and their staffers. Under Styles' measure, which his office shared with CNBC, that's this outlet here, lawmakers who bet on events that they have insider knowledge of would need to pay a fee of $2,000 or 10% of the value of the transaction, whichever is greater, and any gains. Just sounds like a money grab. Just pay a fee. You're making millions here. Pay $2,000. So stupid. The provision does allow lawmakers and their families to place bets on events outside the political sphere, such as sports. Although sports now is starting to become part of the political sphere too. Look at all the army, the military stuff you see during the NFL. Our salute to the troops, even though the military pays for those salutes. Some avenues of prediction markets I don't think create the ethical complications that other areas do, Style told CNBC. If an individual or their spouse or dependent child wants to predict the winner of the Super Bowl, I don't think that is a unique ethical challenge in the House. Unless, you're friends with one of the coaches. What's up, Spirit of the Age? I did say Mike Johnson. Thank you for picking that up. I will not say Mike Johnson because that guy's a dick. So you get that? It's Johnson. That's a thing. The new proposal limits the kind of bets members of Congress can make. Comes the scrutiny of prediction markets like Kalshi and Polymarket increases. Isn't that Don Jr.'s thing, Polymarket? I think he runs that. The Senate adopted a rule change earlier this year that bars senators and their staffers from making bets on prediction markets. The House bill will need Senate passage as well. That is a high bar if it is attached to the larger stock trading ban, which lacks Democratic support because it focuses only on lawmakers and not on Trump, and because they do that shit too. Democrats and Republicans all do that insider trading bullshit if they're not being paid off by AIPAC. Isn't that nice? Isn't that how that works? So in Cali, going back to Cali, I don't think so. Failing moral test, Newsom rejects compromise 2% wealth tax on California billionaires. How about that? Yeah, of course, any and all elected representative officials should be barred from any sort of market enrichment, these weird predictive markets, financial or otherwise. Yeah. I mean, it's not going to happen, but they should. I'm telling you, man, there's a reason why I pray for falling sky rocks. I'm just saying. California governor and haircut captain, champion of the world, Gavin Newsom refused to budge from his opposition to a proposed wealth tax on the Golden State's billionaires, swiftly dismissing a union-led coalition's effort to compromise by reducing its desired 5% rate by more than half. In a letter to Newsom on Thursday, the Billionaire Tax Now coalition urged the governor and likely 2028 presidential candidate to support a 2% wealth tax on the state's richest 200 billionaires. The coalition's demand came hours after organizers announced that they had collected enough signatures to get their proposed one-time 5% tax on billionaire wealth on California's ballot in November. So they already have that on the ballot for November, but they wanted to compromise with Newsom. I don't get that. It probably would pass. Newsom's office made clear that the governor, who has been outspoken in his opposition to the proposed 5% wealth tax, would not support the compromise offer either. The governor has been clear that he is a prick and nobody cares about nobody but him. I'm sorry. The governor has been clear that he is strongly opposed to a California-only wealth tax. Tara Gallegos, a spokesperson for Newsom, said, changing the tax rate doesn't change the measure's fundamental flaws that harm working Californians. Working Californians. This is targeted at billionaires, and she's talking about working Californians. See how they twist that shit? The Billionaire Tax Now coalition on Thursday offered to withdraw its popular ballot initiative calling for a one-time 5% levy on California billionaires' wealth if Newsom agreed to throw his weight behind legislation enacting a 2% wealth tax instead. Organizers and supporters say a tax on the vast fortunes of the state's wealthiest residents would help avert a looming healthcare disaster spurred by federal Medicaid cuts that Trumpy and congressional Republicans passed last summer. California is home to more billionaires than any state in the nation, the coalition wrote in this letter to Newsom on Thursday. Their wealth has grown a staggering 212% in the last 6 years alone to more than $2.2 trillion. A 2% one-time tax on that accumulated wealth is modest by any objective measure, especially if it means keeping emergency rooms open and saving patient lives. It's more than appropriate at a moment when every other Californian is being asked by Sacramento to sacrifice. We need you to stand up against one of Trump's worst and deadliest domestic policy blunders yet, the cuts to California health care contained in the one big bullshit bill. Let's save patient lives together. U.S. Representative Ro Khanna from California, Silicon Valley representative who has supported the proposed wealth tax in the face of angry billionaire backlash, expressed support for the 2% compromise offer in a social media post on Thursday, noting that 250 billionaires own half of California GDP. Taxing them at 2% would save health care for millions. Healthcare workers have already compromised from 5%, Khanna wrote. I want a Democratic Party that will stand for the working class. This is a moral test for our party. Whose side are you on? Yeah, and I take Ro Khanna with a grain of salt too, Captain Zionist guy. You know, just because they say shit that you agree with doesn't mean that that person is A-okay. Always be skeptical. So yeah, a one-time 2% on billionaires, and Captain Haircut said no, I'm owned by them. I can't go against my lovers. I can't go against my lovers, y'all. Or my barber. Speaking of sleazy, Trump has used taxpayer money to purchase stakes in dozens of companies. Congress is about to make it easier. How about that? Yeah, there's a real Captain Haircut right there. By taking equity stakes in more than a dozen private businesses, the Trump administration has stretched executive power to new heights, and now Congress is working to ensure that future presidents get the same opportunity. The old NDAA. The Senate's version of the 2027 National Defense Authorization Act includes a provision to create a new slush fund within the U.S. Treasury for the purpose of buying stakes in more private businesses. Isn't that fascism? I'm pretty sure that's the... Okay. The Pentagon would be able to tap the proposed defense equity investment account to make investments of up to $500 million in private companies involved in the production of, quote, critical minerals, materials, and chemicals or batteries. The provision, which is buried within the 1,500-word bill drafted this week by the Senate Armed Service Committee, would allow the direct or indirect purchase, acquisition, or commitment of funds by the Department of Defense in exchange for an ownership interest, convertible interest, warrant, revenue-sharing instrument, or other similar financial instrument in a non-federal entity. Besides the $500 million cap on those investments, the government is also forbidden from taking more than a 50% ownership stake in any private business. Right now, anyway. Other than that, however, there seem to be a few limitations or guardrails on how the new equity account could be used. During a closed-door session last week, the Senate Armed Service Committee reportedly voted down an amendment that would have prohibited the Trump administration from taking equity stakes in businesses with ties to the president, his family members, and members of his cabinet. Some of the Trump administration's investment decisions have seemingly benefited those close to Trump. Well, you think? Vulcan Elements, which makes magnets out of rare earth elements, got a $620 million loan from the Pentagon's Office of Strategic Capital. Trump Jr. is a partner at the company. Hey, how about that? Senator Alyssa Slotkin out of Michigan told Notice that Republicans rejected that proposal after expressing worries about how Trump would react. Over and over, we heard in the NDAA markup a number of my Republican colleagues express concern that they didn't want to insult the president. Jesus. They didn't want to send a negative message to the president. They didn't want to offend the president, or they were scared of his reaction, Slotkin said. It would be a good idea for lawmakers to prevent the president from using a new Pentagon slush fund to enrich his relatives and allies, but it would be better to avoid creating this account in the first place. Congress should not be codifying Trump's socialist behavior, please, and should not be making it easier and legal for future presidents to follow suit. You're talking about corporate socialism. Yeah, that's definitely what's going on. If Washington wants more domestic or allied production of minerals, magnets, chemicals, or batteries, it has tools that do not require making taxpayers shareholders, like removing permitting and regulatory hurdles or following the regular government procurement process, writes Tad DeHaven, a policy analyst at the Cato Institute. What it shouldn't do is pick favored companies and make the federal government an investor, customer, regulator, and political Patreon. I know, water wet, sky blue, Trump profiting off of being president. We've seen that during the Iran war. We got peace, and then the stock market goes up, gas goes down. Oh shit, we're gonna blow them up. Gas goes up, stocks goes down. It's all just manipulation. Yeah, I know. Pay a fee to whom? Yeah, exactly. It probably goes back to the government. It's all circular. A $2,000 fine for the, yeah, that's just so, please. Ooh, excuse me. How's everybody doing? Anybody sneak in here? I think we caught up with everybody. So there's this, the Supreme Court eases restrictions on drug users owning firearms. Drug users, them old drug users. The U.S. Supreme Court has sided with a marijuana user from the state of Texas who has argued that a federal law barring illegal drug users from owning a firearm violated the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution. All 9 of the court's justices ruled in favor of Ali Daniel Hamani on Thursday. The anonymous ruling narrows but does not eliminate the government's ability to restrict gun access for drug users. The court's unanimous ruling will protect millions of Americans from draconian punishment simply because they happen to use marijuana and own a firearm, Niz Ahmad, a lawyer for Hamani, said after Thursday's ruling. Yeah, I was about to say, if anybody needs pot, is a lot of these people who own guns and are just like, chomping at the bit to get to a gun. The case brought together an unusual political alliance of pro-gun and civil liberties groups, both of whom supported Hamani's argument that he should not be denied a constitutional right on the basis of his drug use. They keep saying drug use. It's not drug. It's just, anyway. The ACLU said in a previous statement that the law gave too much power to federal prosecutors and risked arbitrary or discriminatory enforcement. The decision upholds a ruling by a lower court dismissing an illegal gun possession charge against Hamani, a Pakistani-American dual citizen who told authorities he used marijuana or cannabis. The Trump administration, for its part, argued in favor of the 1968 federal law restricting firearms ownership for drug users. Lawyers for the administration likened the law to regulations from the 1800s that allowed the government to temporarily disarm those deemed habitual drunkards. Justice Neil Gorsuch noted in his opinion that the country has seen a more relaxed stance towards cannabis in recent years, with many states moving to legalize its use. Yeah, look at that. Whatever one thinks of these developments, the federal government has not just tolerated them, it helped fuel them, Gorsuch wrote, all of which leaves it awkwardly positioned to suggest that the millions of Americans who now regularly use marijuana are categorically and unusually dangerous. However, he noted that the government could still prosecute a person addicted to drugs under the law after the ruling. We do not address efforts to ban addicts or those presently intoxicated from possessing a firearm. The law at the center of the decision was previously used in a case against Hunter Biden, Sleepy Joe's kid, he was convicted of purchasing a firearm while addicted to cocaine in 2018, but was later pardoned by his father near the end of his time in office. So, smoke your drugs, and then the pew pew. Yeah, and I mean, if you've never experienced cannabis or you don't know what it's about, then you'd probably be like, oh, the demons, well, now they get to shoot guns at people. Let me tell you something about cannabis. The worst thing you could probably do on cannabis is, eat too many sandwiches, right? Or polish off a bag of chips in one setting. The last thing you're wanting to do is put a gun in your hand and kill some people. So, oh, you're in a dispensary now? That's funny. Hey, what's up, Game.Phil? Good to see you. Kill your egregores. Good to see you as well. The weed is good. Yeah. If you've never experienced cannabis, then you should probably not have it much say so in that, I wouldn't think. What do we got here? Come on. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So that's the end of our news block. Time to get to the propaganda watch. And journalists, it's not just Israel that's killing journalists, as we'll get to here in just a second.
Sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these things they are true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
All right, Mozambique journalists face killings in silence as repression deepens. Mozambique's journalists are facing growing pressure after years of killings, disappearances, and attacks that have gone unpunished. Violence against reporters intensified after disputed 2024 elections, while a long-running system of intimidation has reached a new peak. This sixth installment, Mozambique Exposed. Oh, okay. So that's what this is. Albino Sabia's final words were broadcast live on Facebook as he lay dying after being shot while covering a protest in southern Mozambique. They shot me and they're still shooting. I'm dying. On December 12, 2024, the 30-year-old blogger was filming police firing tear gas during a demonstration in Ressano Garcia, a Mozambican town on the border with South Africa, when he was shot twice in the back. Demonstrations contesting the results of the October 2024 general election, which triggered months of unrest, were in full swing at the time. Mozambican journalists paid a heavy price for covering the post-election crisis, said Muthoko Mumo, Africa program coordinator at the Committee to Protect Journalists. Mozambique's branch of the Media Institute of Southern Africa, MISA, filed a legal complaint over violence against journalists during the unrest that followed the election. Proceedings were open. MISA was heard in February 2025, but since then, nothing has happened. Journalist Slade Muthemba, the Press Freedom Organization spokesperson in Maputo, told RFI, that's this sort here, the post-election unrest lasted nearly 4 months and marked the peak of a long-running crackdown on press freedom and liberty of expression. Mozambique is one of the few African countries never to have experienced a change of government since independence. Frelimo, the Mozambique Liberation Front, has ruled the country since 1975. What happened during the post-election crisis was something we had never seen before, Luis Nachote, coordinator of the Mozambique Center for Investigative Journalism, told RFI. Over the past 10 years, we have faced severe restrictions. There have been many cases of people being arrested and disappearing. 4 journalists have been killed or have disappeared since 2020. Among them was João Chamuse, probably butchered that name, editor-in-chief of online newspaper Panto por Panto, who was found dead at his home in Catembe on the outskirts of Maputo in December 2023. His phones and computer were gone. Community radio journalist Ibrahimo Umbaruko, that's a cool name, disappeared after being taken away by men in uniform in 2020. Online journalist Arlindo Chisale from Pemba in the northern province of Cabo Delgado, disappeared in similar circumstances last year. Rich in gas, rubies, and lithium, Cabo Delgado is central to Mozambique's economic future, but the province has also been the scene of an insurgency by a terrorist group known locally as Al-Shabaab. That's right. Remember that? We talked about them before. And linked to the Islamic State, although with no connection to the Somali militant group of the same name. The conflict has killed more than 6,500 people and displaced nearly 1 million. The post-election crisis frightened the regime, and it responded very harshly, said Borges Nahamir. These names, I swear. A researcher at the Institute for Security Studies, a South African think tank. Today, its control over the media is even stronger. Demonstrations, the creation of Animola, the party of opposition figure Venancio Mondlane, the defeated presidential candidate and driving force behind the protest movement, and the war in Cabo Delgado have all become taboo subjects, he told RFI. If you want information on these subjects, you have to search online. You won't find anything in traditional media. Yeah. Among other things, too. Online platforms have instead become an important space where many young Mozambicans exchanged information. Communication through the internet and social media ended up raising awareness among young people. That's what triggered the mass outrage during the post-election crisis, explained journalist and sociologist Helder Leonel. Leonel has hosted the weekly radio program Hip Hop Time for 20 years. It has become a hub for rap and alternative culture in Mozambique. Though WhatsApp groups and memes shared on social media, a narrative emerges that runs counter to the one pushed by those in power, he said. The Mozambican government or senior Frelimo figures have stakes in the country's 3 telecoms operators, Mcell, Vodacom, and Movitel. Many young people have responded by finding ways around those controls, most commonly by using a VPN or virtual private network to hide their online activity. Alternative voices gathered on May 6th at the former home of rapper Azagai in Matola to honor the musician who died of an epileptic seizure 3 years earlier. Azagai became a symbol of dissent after authorities censored his 2008 song Povo no Poder, People in Power, which has since become an anthem for many young Mozambicans. It's still almost impossible to hear it on the radio, Lionel said. Different versions of the song have nevertheless been viewed more than 1.5 million times on YouTube. Marches held across several Mozambican cities after Azagai's funeral in March 2023 were violently dispersed by security forces. At least 19 people were injured in Maputo, including 2 who were seriously hurt. Activists, artists, journalists, and academics came together at the house, which has since been turned into a library. Outside, dozens of books were laid out on a table, including Traveler's Baggage by Portuguese writer and 1998 Nobel laureate, literature laureate Jose Saramago, biographies of former Mozambican President Samora Machel and U.S. activist Malcolm X, and a comparative study of the first presidents of Angola and Senegal, Agostinho Neto and Leopold Sedar Senghor. Above the entrance was written, O verbo que não se cala, the word that never falls silent. So yeah, it's not just Israel that oppresses journalists. Of course, everything that's going on in Africa, of course, another hotbed. It doesn't seem like there's any peaceful place on the planet. So I'm just going to assume that World War III is already happening in full swing, which is probably what's going on. Now we get more to Israel. Okay. The rest of this is just going to be about Israel because they seem to always have something to do with propaganda, right? Yeah. So Israel severs contact with EU's callous over reported apartheid remarks. That's her right there. Kaja Kallas, not to be confused with Kaja Gugu. West Jerusalem will cut all contact with EU top diplomat Kaja Kallas over her reported comparison of the country to apartheid-era South Africa. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar has announced Relations between the bloc and Israel's far-right government have steadily deteriorated in the past few years over the war in Gaza, accelerating illegal settlement building and the invasion of Lebanon. The EU for years has been accused of double standards over its failure to prosecute Israel for possible genocide while imposing 21 rounds of sanctions against Russia. The gaffe-prone Kallis recently tried to compensate for Brussels' weak position with statements more critical of Israel. On Thursday, Saar referenced recent media reports that Kallis had compared modern Israel to apartheid-era South Africa during a private meeting. The minister accused the EU top diplomat of acting obsessively and with blatant unfairness and vowed to sever contact with her. As the foreign minister of the state of Israel, I have no choice but to sever all contact with Miss Kallis until she retracts the blood libel she directed at the world's only Jewish state, which is also the only democracy in the Middle East. Take a drink. That's another good drinking game there. The only democracy in the Middle East. Saar wrote on the tweeters, Kallis attempted to defuse the situation, vaguely stating that the EU is always committed to be a constructive relationship with Israel, as well as dialogue and engagement. At the same time, she reaffirmed the bloc's commitment to a two-state solution and condemned illegal Israeli settlements. The response landed poorly with Saar, who reiterated the demand for Kallis to explicitly comment on the reported apartheid comparison. With all due respect, and somebody starts off with all due respect, they're about to say fuck you. With all due respect, even in your remarks here, you refrain from denying or condemning what has been attributed to you and published publicly, responded Saar. If you did indeed make these vile and defamatory statements, stand behind them. If you did not make them, deny it. Or you could lie like we do here in Israel. EU-Israeli ties were also damaged recently over the Global Samud Flotilla incident. The fleet, organized by international activists and humanitarian groups, attempted to run the Israeli blockade of Gaza of late in May. The flotilla was intercepted with its participants allegedly subjected to widespread physical and sexual abuse and mocked personally by the far-right minister Itamar Ben-Gvir. The incident prompted multiple EU nations to impose a travel ban on Ben-Gvir, while Italy and France launched independent probes. So somebody says, like, you make an offhand remark about apartheid, and then you got to walk it back. The EU. To all my European friends over there. Yeah, we have crazy over here. You guys have crazy over there too. And yeah, they're all just seems like they're all just nothing but vassals for Israel, right? So back here at home, of course, you've got the usual suspects. They're like, what are you doing, Trumpy? Why are you messing with our girlfriend, Israel? Pro-Israel hawks in U.S. criticize Iran MOU, but avoid clashing with Trump. That's not hypocritical or anything. Look at this guy. Jeez Louise. He looks like a game show host on Hee Haw. A few months ago, it would have been unthinkable for a mainstream politician in the U.S., let alone a Republican senator, to acknowledge Iran's right to self-defense. Wait a minute, what? It would have been unthinkable. Okay. But on Wednesday, that's exactly what Senator Roger Marshall did. I think they have to be able to defend themselves. Take a drink, he told news channel CNN. Analysts say such statements are a sign of shifting attitudes in the U.S. This week, in the wake of Trumpies agreeing to an MOU with Iran, some Republicans appeared to have dulled their hawkishness. I'm afraid Trump is going to, get them primaried or something. Still, many pro-Israel groups and politicians are starting to mobilize against the deal, setting up a potential clash with the White House and those seeking a speedy end to the U.S.-Israel war with Iran. Trump can sell pretty much anything to his hardcore base, said Matthew Duss, the executive vice president at the Center for International Policy, a research and advocacy nonprofit. If he says the Iran war is going great one day and then reverses himself completely and says we're signing a deal to end the war the next day, there's a big part of his base that will just go along with it, and they will get angry at anyone who publicly disagrees. Even so, Duss stressed that pro-Israel groups and politicians are still very upset with the memorandum. The terms of the deal have trickled out slowly since last Thursday, when Trump first teased that the final points of a ceasefire agreement have been approved by all parties. Only on Wednesday did the memorandum's 14 points become public. But the gradual rollout has only partly shielded the memo from hawkish criticism. Another factor is that Republicans are largely reluctant to cross Trump, who has a track record of confronting and defeating dissidents within the party. All I said is that it's Fuck Israel Friday. They've been doing that. I've noticed that too. For a salute. Even some of the most vocal pro-Israel hawks have refrained from taking on Trump since the terms were announced. Senator Lindsey Graham, an ardent cheerleader for the war, said the memorandum will be beneficial for the U.S. Whether or not the United States can reach an acceptable, verifiable deal with Iran regarding its nuclear program and other issues is yet to be determined, but I see little downside to trying, Graham said in a social media post on Wednesday, and also someone who's used to going down on people. Overall, the Republicans have been far more tolerant of the initial agreement than the 2015 nuclear deal signed by Obama back then. Unlike that agreement known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, the current memorandum aims to resolve an act of war. The U.S. and Israel started bombing Iran on February 28th without direct provocation. Public opinion polls have underscored widespread U.S. disapproval towards the conflict, which has also boosted the case for diplomacy in some conservative sectors. The fighting saw Iran close down the Strait of Hormuz, sending global oil prices soaring. In the U.S., that has fueled inflation and economic uncertainty, factors that could weigh on Republican prospects in the upcoming midterms. Tick tock, tick tock. We've seen the cost of war. We've seen that war is not an easy solution. We've seen that it has major economic impacts on Americans, and that Americans are opposed to it, said Ryan Costello, the policy director at the National Iranian American Council, the NIAC, a nonprofit lobbying organization. And this is basically going to tell them what we said earlier. The memo signed on Wednesday dictates a regional ceasefire to end the war, mandating that fighting stop not only in Iran, but in Lebanon. Of course, that hasn't happened. The deal will see Iran reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and the U.S. lift its siege against the country. So in exchange for all that, Iran will receive some economic relief. The U.S. is set to lift sanctions against Iran's energy exports. And we told you about all this stuff earlier. On Wednesday, Trump said missiles aren't the problem, and or limiting Iran's missile capacity has been a key goal for Israel for years, but Tehran has ruled out any concessions. We told you about that. When Trump said missiles aren't the problem and suggested the issue could be addressed as part of regional security talks. What am I going to do? Am I going to let Saudi Arabia have missiles, but Iran can't have them? It doesn't work that way. Well, it did work that way. Until you got your ass handed to you. But previously, Trump had advocated for limiting Iran's arsenal. Costello said Trump's sudden shift is disorienting. Trump last week was sounding more like John Bolton, he said, referring to former U.S. official with the mustache. Not unlike this one. You like that? Isn't that nice? Then this week, he's sounding more like John Mearsheimer, Costello added, pointing to the realist political scientist, Ted Cruz. Costello explained that while some Republicans are falling in line with Trump's pivot, others are testing whether they might oppose the president's diplomacy with Iran. There's a crowd that's trying to see how open they can be in opposition to this, not just the memorandum of understanding, but everything that's envisioned in it, for which is a pretty significant resolution of tensions with Iran. Senator Ted Cruz, who called the deal ill-advised, falls into that camp. History teaches that giving billions of dollars to theocratic lunatics who want to murder us is not a good idea. Propaganda. I think the president is receiving some very poor advice on this deal, Cruz told the publication The Hill earlier this week. Pro-Israel commentators like Fox News, Mark Levine, or Levin, whatever the hell his name is, also described the memorandum as a capitulation to Iran and Hezbollah. Levin, who had heaped praise on Trump in recent months for launching the war, implicitly criticized him over his comments on Iran's missiles. Iran's ballistic missiles have always been a major issue, and in fact, the administration talked about the regime building a circle of protection around its nuclear facilities with ballistic missiles. Levin wrote in a post on the tweeters. I know he sounds like Smeg's Breath a little bit. All the Weasley guys all get the same voice. And no, if other countries have ballistic missiles, Iran should not. Iran is a terrorist regime that has killed our people. Killed our people. Whose people? How many more times do we need to be reminded of this? They've killed our people. He later pointedly denounced the U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, who has been the key U.S. negotiator with Iran. The Foundation for Defense Democracies, the FDD, a think tank that has been promoting military action against Iran, rejected the deal as well, saying that the memorandum guarantees the survival of the governing system in Iran and allows it to rebuild itself after the U.S.-Israeli strikes. The MOU between the U.S. and Iran hands the terrorist regime the one victory it could never have achieved on the battlefield, financial reprieve, two FDD representatives wrote in a New York Post column. AIPAC also released a lengthy, I'm pretty sure they did, also released a lengthy statement with detailed explanations of what it sees as failures in the memorandum, including the sanctions relief and a lack of restriction on Iran's missiles. Everybody's talking about them missiles because they know them missiles will fuck you up. And its support for regional groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. The pro-Israel lobby group statement still lauded Trump for bombing Iran. Yeah, okay. And there's more here. But basically, this is going to be one of those things. If internally it's not going to be, if it's not going to be sabotaged internally by these jackasses, Israel's going to do a much better job of sabotaging any sort of peace negotiations with Iran. So, and what his anal words. And what are people saying inside Israel about Trump? In case you care. A large majority of Israelis say no trust toward Trump after Iran MOU. Shocking. I know. A bunch of psychopaths don't like that you ended a war. 71% of Israeli citizens say they do not trust Trumpy to look out for their interests in negotiations with Iran, and only 11% say their country won the war, according to a Channel 12 poll published Thursday. The results mark a sharp shift from previous polling trends where Trump had previously enjoyed much stronger support among Israeli respondents. However, the latest figures show a drop in trust from 62% to 21% within a week. Asked about Bibi's conduct in relation to the U.S.-Iran agreement, 52% of respondents say it harmed Israeli interests, while 24% said it helped, and another 24% said they don't know. On perceptions of the recent war on Iran and its allies in the region, 43% of respondents said Israel lost, 41% said it ended inconclusively, and only 11% said Israel's won, as we told you. The poll highlights growing skepticism over Israel's position following the Iran-U.S. Memorandum of Understanding signed this week, as well as concerns over recent public criticism of Israeli officials by Trump and J.D. Vance. In a recent interview with the New York Times, Vance told the reporter, "You've seen people in their system, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, who've attacked the deal, and I guess my response to them would be, what is your exact proposal?" Which would be, keep bombing Iran for us, please. That seems to be their response. Vance then said, you're a country of 9 million people. You can't just kill your way out of solving every single national security problem that you have. It's funny how they could just talk so boldly to their girlfriend like that. That's crazy. Prior to that interview, during a White House press briefing, Vance expressed frustration toward the Israeli government regarding their criticism of the U.S.'s decision regarding the war on Iran and their personal attacks towards Trump. Vance told reporters, Trump is the only head of state in the entire world who is sympathetic to the nation of Israel at this moment in time, and he happens to be the head of state of the world's superpower. He added, if I was in the cabinet of the Israeli government, I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world. You better watch your mouth, Israel. You know who you talking to? Vance emphasized the central role that the U.S. has played in Israel's defense, saying that 2/3 of all Israel's weapons used throughout its multi-front aggressions in the last 3 months have been built by American hands and paid for by American tax dollars or federal funds. He concluded by saying anybody in Israel who thinks their biggest problem is the president of the U.S. needs to wake up and smell the reality of the situation that country faces. A Ma'ariv poll published on June 12th found that 50% of Israelis now believe their country's deterrence capacity is weakened following their renewed aggression against Iran and Lebanon and the Iranian retaliatory strikes that followed. The survey also showed a divided response to Netanyahu's decision to order strikes on Iran despite reported U.S. objections. A poll by Israel's public broadcaster, Khan, found that 57% of Israelis believe the military has failed to achieve victory in any war since October 2023, while only 28% said success had been achieved. What? Why, Trumpy, why have you forsaken us? Said Israel. Yeah. And last time I checked, Trump ain't the president of Israel. He's the president of the United States. So y'all need to suck it up, Buttercup. Okay. So, with all that being said, of course, Netanyahu gears up a U.S. influence campaign to interfere in U.S.-Iran talks. Shocking! I know, none of this is news. I know you already know this stuff. So Netanyahu's gearing up for efforts to influence the final U.S.-Iran agreement via right-wing pro-Israel senators and media figures in a bid to exert pressure on Trumpy, CNN reported yesterday. Netanyahu is aiming to influence the final Iran deal using right-wing media figures and friendly senators to exert pressure on Trump, the outlet cites an Israeli sources saying. The premier is skeptical of Iran's intentions and believes they were never willing to negotiate in good faith, according to the source. Projection much there, Israel? About never willing to negotiate in good faith? The report says Netanyahu's own assessment is that there will not be a final agreement between Washington and Tehran. Tehran will not genuinely agree to restrictions on its nuclear program, the Israeli source told CNN. That's true. That they're not. They're gonna keep doing what they're doing. Since the signing of the memorandum of understanding, Netanyahu has been trying to leverage right-wing U.S. media personalities such as Mark Levin, who stated on Wednesday that the New Deal doesn't even make any sense. Again, projection, because Mark Levin doesn't make any sense. Levin also referred to the clause on a reconstruction and investment fund for Iran as a slush fund. Fox News show host continued to criticize the MOU on Thursday and said, the insanity of these defending parts of the MOU or major matters left out of this MOU is truly stunning, adding that the exclusion of the Iranian missile program is an outrage. Israeli officials, both from Netanyahu's coalition and from the opposition, have slammed the deal. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich recently said it was a bad deal, both for Israel and for the world. Netanyahu and his war minister Israel Katz have both threatened more attacks on the Islamic Republic. Israeli journalists and media outlets are also expressing outrage over the MOU. Journalists and media outlets, you mean the propagandists. The first clause of the agreement that addresses Iran and Lebanon in the same breath, an end to the war, but this is an end that strengthens Hezbollah just as the agreement as a whole strengthens Iran, wrote Israeli journalist Ben Dror Yemeni. The best strategy for Israel right now is to absorb the fact that Trump most likely won't lift a finger against the Iranians until the congressional elections in November, and to use this period to convince them that if he doesn't act afterwards, he will go down in history as one of the greatest losers of all time, said Channel 14's Tamir Morag, appealing to his ego, I guess. Hebrew media has reported that Israel was blocked by the U.S. From viewing the full text of the MOU. According to the Wall Street Journal, Trump is now following up with his team on the accuracy of what Netanyahu says during their phone conversations. This is a deviation from his former habit and indicates he's losing trust in the Israeli premier, Wall Street Journal alleged. Why are you blowing up buildings? And we always say, stop blowing up buildings, Trump told Netanyahu in a recent call about Lebanon. Perfectly fine in Gaza. But Lebanon, no dice. Violations in Lebanon have not stopped. Israel continues to occupy South Lebanon and has bombarded the country every day since the MOU was announced. And of course, if you didn't catch this at the top of the show, Iran has suspended talks they were supposed to have today in Switzerland. That's not going to happen, and they haven't set a date for when it's going to happen, if it happens. Just a reminder there. Earlier this month, Tehran launched a missile attack on Israel in response to one of its attacks on the Lebanese capital. Israel struck back with heavy airstrikes but called off a larger assault. Katz has said any further Iranian retaliation over Lebanon will be met with full force strikes on the Islamic Republic. The MOU was signed electronically overnight and announced by Iran and Pakistan early yesterday, but aside from a full ceasefire in Lebanon, the official MOU text includes a withdrawal of U.S. forces from areas surrounding Iran, Iranian support for resistance groups, and Tehran's ballistic missile program. Key Israeli demands that Tel Aviv has been pressuring Washington about are not included. During an initial 30-day period, which should begin today, Iran is meant to gradually reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Like we said, they kind of shut it back down somewhat, or not so much them, but the fact that they've delayed these talks has made people a little bit, I don't know if I want to get up in here or not, kind of situation when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. And then it goes on, the details will be hammered out during technical negotiation, blah, blah, blah. But we'll have to update you on that. Because, like I said, they have postponed this meeting, and we'll see what happens over the weekend, and maybe by next week we'll know something more definitive, but chances are I doubt that's going to happen. Yeah, so finally today we have a video by James Lee, and how there's all kinds of fuckery surrounding that. So let's get to it. It's a little bit longer than it usually is, about 15 minutes, but I think it's totally 16 minutes. I think it's totally worth it. So let's watch.
Yeah, and
Right.
of course, who tried to assassinate him?
Yeah.
Tried
What's
to
going
assassinate
on?
John Bolton? Tried to.
What's going on?
So I'm telling you what's going on.
They are really having quite a moment, aren't they? What's going on? The Iran peace deal has officially been signed as of yesterday evening, but how long-lasting is this peace? Well, we have some intelligence to indicate that our national sovereignty will once again be pushed to the limit by our greatest ally. First, we have video of President Donald Trump signing the deal with Iran last night to end the Middle East war at a candlelit dinner at the Palace of Versailles following the G7 summit, hosted by, you can see him sitting right next to President Trump there, the French President Emmanuel Macron. And this morning, we now know of the exact terms of this deal. This is a copy of the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding between Iran and the United States. I'm going to cover for you the highlights, starting with the first point here, very important, that Iran and the United States and its allies will immediately and permanently cease military operation on all fronts, including in Lebanon. Yes, we are talking about you, Israel. Another clause, point 5, very important, that the Strait of Hormuz will reopen with no charge for 60 days only, meaning that after 60 days, Iran would theoretically be able to, if they wanted to, charge a toll, which is a massive concession. Remember, ships were free to come and go as they pleased through the strait before February 28th, before we launched this war with Israel. Point 6, this is a big one right here, that the United States of America undertakes with its regional partners to develop a definitive mutually agreed plan with at least $300 billion for the reconstruction and economic development of the Islamic Republic of Iran, aka we are talking about reparations here. We're being told right now that this won't be taxpayer money, which could mean many different things, and I'm sure BlackRock will be chomping at the bit. So not ideal. Point 7, this is a little hard to read, but it says that the United States of America undertakes to terminate all types of sanctions against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Another huge concession, because we have been waging economic war against Iran for decades. Whether you agree with it or disagree with it, that's what's been happening. We have not allowed them to trade with any of our allies, any of our trading partners, so they've had to resort to trading with the Russians and the Chinese, but it now looks like Iran is open for business, which Israel, I'm sure they're not too happy about. Next is no nuclear weapons, which is a little bit silly at this point because all the intelligence that we had leading up to the war indicated that they hadn't had no nukes to begin with. And we also did that bombing operation, if you remember last year, where Trump declared that their nuclear facilities were entirely destroyed, and anybody who said otherwise is fake news. I mentioned sanctions before, but point 10 says that Iran will be now able to sell oil on the open market. Something, again, they weren't able to do before this war, so expect them to get much, much richer in the coming years. The last call out I want to make is point 11, which says the United States of America undertakes to make fully available for use the frozen or restricted funds and assets of the Islamic Republic of Iran upon implementation of this MOU. Another huge infusion of cash for the Iranians. Objectively speaking, the United States has lost this war. But we all sort of knew that this was the likely outcome prior to it starting, which is why every single sane person was like, please, Mr. President, please do not do this. Trump, of course, listened to Netanyahu instead of his own intelligence. So now, today, in all reality, this is the best possible outcome for the United States, bar us sending in ground troops or sacrificing tens of thousands of American lives to probably most likely eventually end up more or less with this deal that's being presented. And predictably, Israel and the entire Zionist media apparatus in the United States is having a bit of a meltdown today.
Yeah, and
Right.
of course, who tried to assassinate him,
Yeah.
tried
What's
to
going
assassinate
on?
John Bolton, tried to.
What's going on?
So I'm telling you what's going on.
They are really having quite a moment, aren't they? What's going on? Finally, it seems like they're getting a taste of their own medicine and what the rest of us have been feeling since, I don't know, 1963. Here's Ben Shapiro on Fox.
With that said, this MOU appears to be, just from the text, a disaster that does not achieve any of the actual signal goals that were set by the administration at the beginning. There were effectively 5 goals that were set by the administration at the beginning. One was ending the nuclear program, not just nuclear weapons, no nuclear enrichment, zero enrichment. That is not in the deal. Ballistic missiles ended. That is not in the deal. And the president today suggested that ballistic missiles should actually continue to be held by the Iranians because the Saudis, our allies, also hold ballistic missiles. Then you have the support of terrorism. That is not part of the deal. Anything that looks like an attempt to end terrorism. A permanent opening of the Strait of Hormuz toll-free. Not only is that not in the deal appears to have a provision allowing Iran and Oman to attempt to toll the strait after 60 days. And then finally, the idea that Iran would receive some sort of sanctions relief after all of those things happen. We are already seeing from day one relief in their ability to ship oil out of Iran. In my opinion, the Vice President of the United States, the chief negotiator on this particular project, has not well served the president.
It's funny how these guys always stick with President Trump, but as soon as he turns against Israel, it's like, what the heck is he doing? But if you notice, they're still deeply afraid to directly criticize him. Mark Levin, ultra Israel firster, suggested the other day that Congress must first approve this peace deal, which is utterly ridiculous. What, you can start a war without Congress, but you need Congress to end a war? The last one I'll play, because there's literally so many of these. We literally have hours of footage from just the last day or so, but this is Mike Huckabee, who I would say isn't so much the ambassador to Israel, but the ambassador from Israel. This is what he had to say.
It's also my job to represent the importance of Israel to the United States. This is just another reminder that it is your heritage, without a doubt. But minister, it is also the heritage of the United States. Without Israel, without the Jewish Foundation, there would not be an America. We owe our very existence to what happened in this land.
That's a new one, because I don't remember learning from even the Robert Maxwell Israeli spy McGraw-Hill textbooks that John Adams and Alexander Hamilton were writing about the Israelis in the Federalist Papers. I don't remember Thomas Jefferson mentioning Judeo-Christian values in the Declaration of Independence. And I certainly did not see the IDF fighting alongside George Washington in the Revolutionary War. Look, Israel is 78 years old. Donald Trump is 2 years older.
It's appropriate that we release the agreement, and we did send a copy to Israel, by the way.
We sent Israel a copy of the agreement. Oh, you sent them a copy, did you? You BCC'd them? We just reached the outline of a peace agreement with the country we are fighting, with Israel, without consulting Israel, bitch. That's exactly what that means. Shh. Adults are talking. At one point, he said, you know, I just think it's just too much. I think going forward, we may leave the fight against Hezbollah to Jelani, who runs Syria. Now, Jelani, of course, is a former Al-Qaeda leader. He's just a more reasonable person. If you're looking for humane treatment of civilians, you got to go to the Al-Qaeda guy, not the Israeli prime minister. That's what the president said. It's unbelievable.
I mean, no notes. Chef's kiss. But could this be all a ruse? Right? We've seen peace deals fall through before. We've seen Trump lash out at Bibi before. Will this time be any different? Well, not if Netanyahu has anything to say about it. Why did Netanyahu just tweet this? In a work meeting with the head of Mossad. From Axios, top White House officials believe New York Times reporters Maggie Aberman and Jonathan Swamp obtained audio recordings of the Situation Room meetings for their new book. So my question is, where did they get this recording from?
The Israelis spy on the United States. They've always spied on the United States.
Do we spy on them also?
No. And that's written in stone at the CIA. We do not spy on Israel. But they openly spy on us.
So Clinton, right, with his Monica Lewinsky situation.
Yes.
Says Gordon Thomas, a Welsh journalist living in Dublin, claims that long before Kenneth Starr, he was the prosecutor on the Monica Lewinsky case, had ever heard of Monica Lewinsky, Israel's intelligence service was in possession of tapes containing 30 hours worth of intimate talk between President Clinton and his young intern. Thomas also asserts that Jerusalem was holding these tapes either for possible blackmail or to protect its mole in the White House, codename Mega. So like even before the Monica Lewinsky scandal broke,
they were already on them.
I think the Israelis are involved in leaking this transcript to these New York Times reporters. And then now they're putting it out in opportune time because
how they can blow up the peace deal.
I mean, it's an open secret at this point that Israel is spying on us. They've been doing it for decades. By the way, that was a short clip from my weekly podcast called The Today Show, where we get into all the ish from the week, so to speak. I will put a link in the description below if you want to subscribe, which I highly encourage. Thank you in advance for supporting the show. And that Monica Lewinsky thing, I haven't done a full dig on it. I think there's way more to the story. Maybe I should. Let me know what you guys think. But to my point of espionage, former Israeli intel officer Ari Ben-Manash is suggesting that Israel has got a few more tricks up their sleeves. Take a listen here.
If there's a real deal between the Americans and the Iranians, and it's going towards that, Netanyahu will try to sabotage it. One of the ways he'd sabotage it is by putting out Epstein material against U.S. government officials, including Trump. New material that wasn't seen before.
Remember, we have only seen a small percentage of the Epstein files. Some estimates say 30%, some say even less than that. A lot of it redacted due to national security. Right around the time of 9/11, we have a bunch of those files missing, which we have to wonder, what was that all about? Mark Levin has been out here saying the quiet part out loud, if you know what I mean. Take a listen.
But Israel has some very, very powerful weapons that it has not used. I don't know this firsthand. Just go online and read about it. It's a secret that's not so secretive. And they've had him for decades. Israel will survive. Period.
For a guy who wears this big American flag brooch right here, typically, he certainly cares a lot about Israel. But, you know, to give him credit, good on him. At least he's willing to admit that Israel has nukes, whereas the rest of the mainstream media, including the Democrat-controlled outlets, are still running the same old Hasbara talking points distributed from Tel Aviv even today.
How do you characterize this kind of settlement other than the Iranians got what they wanted, the Americans didn't, and that's where we're going from here?
And then, Hagar, what does that mean for the Lebanese?
Yeah, it's a disaster, actually, in so many ways. So Tom mentioned here that the Israelis are now being held back. And it sounds, a lot of people, it sounds like a ceasefire would be a good thing, right? Normally that sounds like something you'd want in Lebanon or anywhere. But the fact is...
Yeah, normally ceasefire is, you know, you think of that as a very good thing. But in this situation, we need to continue to blow up civilian apartments for what reason? Yeah, that's what I thought. This notion that the Democrats are somehow anti-war, wrong. Just wrong. They're also mostly bought and paid for by the Israeli lobby. And fact is, the largest obstacle to peace is Israel because their leader, Netanyahu, would stand trial and likely go to jail once the fighting stops. This morning, it was reported that Israel bombed Lebanon again, even after the U.S.-Iran peace deal had already been signed. Israel does not want peace. They want perpetual war. They want to expand their territory. They want to achieve the Greater Israel Project. This is just breaking as I'm recording this video. Quote, Iran warns of the cancellation of all upcoming negotiations, reimposing the full Hormuz blockade and responding with missiles over the direct violation of the U.S.-Iran MOU's first clause, with Israel continuing military aggressions in southern Lebanon, including last night, despite explicit commitment from the first clause to end the war and guarantee Lebanese sovereignty. Iran explicitly rejects any theater from Trump about Netanyahu being rogue, and now Friday's Geneva meeting to launch the first round of 30-day technical talks between Vance and Galibov is on hold over the violation, as no trip has been confirmed or scheduled just 24 hours after the MOU was signed electronically. It's day one, and Israel has already bombed Lebanon. Their media operatives are openly out there talking about invoking the Samson option, nuking the world, and their intelligence officers are out there threatening blackmail of Trump and other U.S. politicians. We don't got to wait 60 days. It's time to stop this. We have to cut this off. We have to cut off all the funding to Israel. It's time to end all of the military cooperation we have with them. And it's time to halt the technology sharing, the data sharing, the intelligence sharing. Stop all of it. Our greatest enemy is not Iran. It's not Russia. It's not China. Our greatest enemy is Israel. That is it for me this week. What do you guys think? Is this peace deal legit? What do you think Israel has up its sleeve? Because I do not think this saga is over by any stretch of the imagination. Sound off in the comment section below. Also, if you want to support my journalism, you can go to my website, 5149jameslee.com, sign up to become a member. Or there's an option to give a one-time donation, no subscription necessary. You can buy some merch as well. Big announcement about the merch, by the way. I am doing a complete overhaul, starting with the brand new limited edition America 250 shirts. I think they look sick. Got the eagle there, dropping a couple bombs if you notice the details there. Important to acknowledge what this country is, but also remain hopeful. We got the Ben Franklin quote to pair with it. No such thing as a good war. No such thing as a bad peace. Very apt today, I think. So pick one up today. You can get it by the 4th, and it funds independent journalism. But if not, no worries at all. Please just do me a big favor. Hype this video, give it a thumbs up, share it, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell so you can be the first to know when my next video drops. As always, thank you so much for your time, and I will see you in the next one.
A wise man once said in January of 2020, Iran never won a war, but never lost a negotiation. That wise man.
Who said that?
Donald Trump.
Oh, that's what I thought you were going to say.
how do you go back to the United States and convince a skeptical American public that this deal
Well,
is a
look, here they lost militarily. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, good stuff there from James. And yeah, they're going. Israel is going to do everything it can to sabotage this. So this is why we need to keep an eye particularly peeled to this situation, because you know, fuckery's always afoot, and with those guys, what's up, Yoninah? Cause poop, exactly. So yeah, that's it for our propaganda watch. As always, of course, we want to end close to the show with our mutual aid for our folks. All the links are down below in the description if you want to help out our folks there. If you can share out the links, if you can't donate, that works just as well for them. So we start, as always, with our friend Yoninah and her kitty Empress, where they're trying to make a safe trip. She's been going through some extenuating circumstances in her move, so any help you can give to help her, we appreciate that. This is still going on. No one has told me that the Chanda's GoFundMe is no more, so I'm just going to keep announcing it until someone tells me otherwise. So if you could donate to help out with funeral costs and whatever extenuating bills she had, I'm sure she would have appreciated that. Of course, justice for Aspen, who was swept up getting arrested for something she didn't even have any part of down in Georgia, so she has legal funds that she needs to meet. Our buddy Cowboy Kitty, his sister-in-law, is dealing with ICE, and of course legal problems cost money too. And of course our friends NoliDee and Kevin, both of them dealing in the aftermath of fires and still trying to get on their feet. If you could help them out, again, the links are down below in the description, and all the shows, no matter what platform we're running on. And if you know of someone who is in need of mutual aid, let me know. Just email me at ExtraBulla@gmail.com, or just let me know if you're a friend of mine on the tweeters or what have you. And since last week was such a gas on Saturday night, we're doing it again on Saturday night. The ExtraBulla secret show with the chickens and the paraphernalia and the nips. So that's going to be tomorrow night, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific time on YouTube, Rumble, and Facebook. We hope that you can come out for that. I'm sure it'll be a good time because we do some silly things. We are silly people. And speaking of silly, we got this for the end of the show.
Nice beaver.
Thank you. I just had it stuffed.
Let me help you with that.
That old bit. All right. Why am I showing the beaver stuff? Beavers solve flooding problem at London Underground Station. Look at the little cutie right there. It's kind of a long video. We've already had one long video, so I'll just read this to you. So a London Underground station once plagued by constant flooding is now staying dry thanks to some recent arrivals in the neighborhood. Beavers! What? I didn't know they were good for that, too. The Greenford subway station and surrounding streets in the Ealing borough of London used to experience regular flooding during rainstorms, to the point where officials had considered creating an artificial reservoir to alleviate the situation. Those plans were canceled when local conservationists suggested they instead reintroduce beavers, which went extinct in Britain about 400 years ago due to overhunting. Wow, I didn't know. How did they reproduce? And Britain, if they didn't have me. Sorry. The Ealing Beaver Project moved a family of 5 wild beavers into the 24-acre area known as Paradise Fields in 2023. The animals have since transformed the area into a natural wetland. Beaver in a wetland. And the Greenfield Station ceased flooding as a result. Everything downstream is much more protected from flooding than it was before, all because they want to hold that water back so they can have enough water to swim in and feel safe. Seniz Mustafa of the Ealing Beaver Project told CBC News, that's Canadian if you're not in the know. Researchers said there are now at least 8 beavers in the colony. Sean McCormick, a veterinarian, wildlife conservationist, and project leader at the Ealing Beaver Project, said the beavers have also proven popular with locals. None better than a local beaver, right? Who can often be found visiting the area just to watch the animals. We're demonstrating here that actually it's not that wild an idea to live alongside beavers, he told CNN. The beavers are also helping to raise money for the project, with Mustafa leading beaver safaris multiple times a week. The tours, which cost about $37 per person, are frequently sold out. I'm pretty sure if you went on a beaver safari around here, you'd probably be paying more than $37. Just saying, beavers. That is a nice beaver. That's it, y'all. That's it. That's all you get. I'm sorry about that. Sorry about the beavers. Leave it to Beaver, right? So yeah, tomorrow night, secret show. I'll be back Wednesday with Laine P for the Undercurrent Wednesday morning. And of course, we'll be back next Friday morning with Mornin Extra to give you all the bad news that you didn't really want to hear about, but you should probably listen to anyway, because that's usually how that stuff works. Thank you again. If you liked everything, if you enjoyed this, if you could like, share, and subscribe, I'd appreciate that. We have donation links down below as well for us. If you can't donate, if you could share out the links, that helps too. Just trying to impress upon the independent space how important news is to people without some sort of bias as far as like fuckery is concerned. Peace to all y'alls. I'll see y'all tomorrow night. Word to the mother. Yo!
This is SETI Alpha 5! Woo!
Soon.